we're going to be taking a little bit of a detour from my usual line of ranting today. Instead of talking about these things that 5th edition doesn't do well, and here's why 4th does it better. This is something that actually 4th does equally badly. This is one of the shared sins of 4th edition. And it is prevalent throughout Dungeons & Dragons. Every version, as far as I am aware, does this. And it is the initiative roll. Rolling for initiative and getting that initiative order so that everyone can take their turn in a previous a prescribed order. What this does is it clearly divides the game into combat and not combat. By doing this, it's something largely psychological, but there is also a real mechanical aspect to this. People tend to roleplay outside of combat and to not roleplay inside of combat. This is the natural tendency, because you've gone from this sort of free form, you can come up with interesting solutions to any number of problems, to suddenly now, I have a turn, I have so many actions, I am allowed to do these things with my actions. And even when the game says, well, you can do other things too, and here's some rules for improvising, even then, you have to either have a single goal, a single mechanic for defeating an enemy, which is run it out of hit points, or you end up with a situation like in 3rd edition, where some classes were trying to run the enemies out of hit points. Other classes didn't do that because they had saber die effects, or save or suck was a term thrown around as well, where you could get around that goal. That's worse, arguably. But even if everyone is trying to go for run the enemy out of hit points, now you have a clear mechanical goal and clear mechanics for approaching that goal. That is, using attacks, using damage spells, using your list of character abilities from your class in order to achieve that end. And that's all well and good. If people like the combat system for whichever version of D&D you're playing, then that will suffice. But what I have noticed is that people kind of stop role-playing during combat. Even people who are very strong role players, and even people who do role play during combat, it really limits it due to the turn-based nature. Good role playing does not take turns. You speak until you are done talking, or until you get interrupted. You don't have to go in a prescribed order. These are things that are hard to do in an initiative order. And what I've found is that games that don't have initiative mechanics, they don't have an action economy, are better for in-combat role-playing. Because you don't have this moment where it's okay, stop the game, or stop the role-playing part of the game, now we're going to do the combat part of the game. This is a sort of... It's very similar to a lot of video games where you go distinctly from exploration or puzzle solving or story, the story cinematics, into a combat situation. Now you're going to play the game for a little bit, and then when you're done with that, we'll go back to exploring or storytelling later. And I'm not saying it's impossible to include story beats and role-playing into combat. Obviously it's not, but it is harder. There are mechanical incentives for doing the things that are on your character sheet that will achieve the goal that has been set before you. And so the natural tendency for most people is to just use those things. And so the game becomes a lot more analytical. Now, for someone like me who likes strategy, likes tactical movement considerations, I like having a clear goal that I can pursue, that's golden for me. But I also like storytelling, and I also like role-playing. And so the idea that you can't have both is frustrating to me. And this is one of the things that it was near the end of 4th edition's run when I realized that this was a problem for me. The initiative mechanic was taking me out of the story. And I kind of thought that, like, I think I just, I think I'm getting a little bit tired of D&D. And what it was, and I think that's largely true, is that, like, D&D has a very particular flavor and a very particular approach to its story and combat mechanics that is not shared by a lot of other RPGs. I'd say better than half the RPGs on the market don't approach the relationship between role-playing and combat the same way D&D does. Many of them are initiativeless. You don't have turn order. You don't have like an action economy to worry about. And I really gravitate towards those systems in general. Now, obviously, like I'm always gonna have a taste for the bigger, heavier combat. I'm not saying that I don't want to play 4th edition anymore. Obviously, that's not true. I'm a big proponent of people playing 4th edition, myself especially. But I think that the draw of games where fighting does not mean the end of storytelling is really powerful and it's really potent. And I think if more people tried these other games, they would get a new perspective that they could then take back to when they do play D&D. And I think the overall role players, RPG players, communities would be enriched by this shared experience. And so I would encourage, if you have not already, I would encourage you to go find some of these RPGs that are much more narrative focused. Try them. You do it like a short campaign in them and see what you learn. And take those lessons, the things that you like, and bring them back and fold them back into the mix of your D&D game. Or maybe you'll find that you like those better and you don't go back. Either way is good. Find your fun and make it more fun.